Metaverse is the evolution of the internet, in our point of view. If you recall, when the internet first came around in the 90s, it was very difficult to explain to many people, and even more difficult to understand the implications of the internet. I think some of the crowd, probably remember when the internet first came around. There were articles, headlines saying, this is a fad, this is going to be gimmicky, this is going to be niche. And within a decade, this became such an integral part of our life. It's hard to imagine today what we would do without the internet. And then the second version of the internet, which was Web 2.0, which presented the social media trends, and now it's very difficult to imagine the world without social media, regardless of what your favorite form is of social media. So before we start talking about this, I want to take the opportunity to zoom out a little bit more. We are, at the end of the day, we say we're in the business of communication, which started out by telephone, went to computer, went to mobile, and then we think at the metaverse. If we zoom out even further, I was having this discussion with a board member from Volkswagen. He's the grandson of the guy who founded Porsche. And when I was walking him through this, he's like, let me tell you about mobility. And my experience in life is the more successful, the richer the audience, the more philosophical they are about life, right? So he said, when my grandfather invented Porsche, which he made it sound like he invented the car, but it's legitimate that he said the concept of where you lived changed. And his thought process was the same thing with electricity. Electricity does not have an immediate implication just on your everyday. It affects every aspect of your life. Today, we wouldn't be able to have this meeting here if it wasn't for electricity. These are fake windows. We wouldn't have light. So it's difficult to understand the full implications of what this will mean. So before we start going into it a little bit, I want to show you a quick video to talk about what it could potentially mean. So our view of the metaverse, it is an immersive experience within the internet. So rather than looking at the internet in a two-dimensional scheme, you're looking at it in a three-dimensional scheme. It offers you the ability to be inside the internet through an avatar or through any interaction that puts you in any place or time that physics might not allow. Now, it's hard to understand it in certain sectors, but in other sectors, it is very, very obvious. There's a mental shift that you need to understand that needs to happen, just like with mobile, that once you understand that digital assets or digital presence can be as impactful and as powerful as physical presence, you will start bridging that gap. And I'll give you an example of a space that is already in there, like gaming. Gaming now is effectively probably leading the way when it comes to the metaverse. And for many of you that, you might have kids or you might be gamers yourself, will understand that many of these kids put a lot of value into digital assets, shields, weapons, etc. Here's the stats that's interesting. In the US, a third of gamers, so 33% of gamers, spend more money on digital clothes than physical clothes. They buy more stuff that only exists online than physical clothes. So when people say we don't believe in the metaverse, we don't understand it, I think it's a matter of quick adoption. There are many people who said that about the internet. There are many people who said that about credit cards. And what ends up happening is, of course, this will take some time to gain what we call critical mass. And once enough people are using it, the evolutions happen so quickly that people end up creating a thing called basically the digital divide. People who are not able to keep up with this evolution. Today, if you can't interact with the internet, if you can't use a computer, you're practically unemployable. So that's why we are very keen to educate the market on this and try to push what's likely to be, again, like I said, the future. Now, what the metaverse does not do. Metaverse does not replace in-person experiences, right? I'm going to go eat kushari tomorrow because I do this every time I come to Egypt, and this cannot be had in the Metaverse. Abu Tariq, right? Abu Tariq. You cannot have it unless in person. I have many friends. I just ran into someone I know. You can't replace that in the Metaverse. But let's say go back to COVID, where I couldn't see my parents for safety reasons. I couldn't travel. Being able to have a video conference, which is, by the way, part of that Web 3.0, is a great alternative to not seeing them at all. Being able to actually interact with them and feel their presence is a great alternative to not seeing them at all. Your ability to have a job in a country where you cannot travel because of immigration reasons, but you can be there every day at work, is a great alternative to not being there at all. So it's not replacing this dystopic view that you're going to live in this entirely digital world. Is not how it's going to happen. It's supposed to make it richer and more engaging. It's the next generation of the internet providing more immersive experience. So if you're, I had the pleasure to tour this place right before this, and there's no real immersive way to do this unless if you're not here in person, except if I was able to do it in a virtual reality sense. I can get the full scale, scope, color, I can zoom in and out, and further, I can add layers to this. Add layers of information. I can get the history. I had a very knowledgeable guide, but if it wasn't here, I could do it myself from anywhere around the world. It's also important to clarify that it's not just VR. So as Meta, we own the most popular device set, which is Oculus, and we have sold about 10 million devices so far around the world, and it's growing really fast. We announced a new device recently, but we know that for this to reach critical mass, it can't just depend on devices for accessibility reasons. So the majority of people will, first interaction with the Metaverse and ongoing interaction with the Metaverse will entail them using their phones, their laptops, or any digital device that they have accessibility to. Probably the phone is going to be the main driver. So it doesn't have to be VR, but if you haven't tried the VR devices, I highly, highly recommend you try it because it's very, very difficult to imagine the possibilities unless you've seen how immersive it is. This is not something that's going to happen tomorrow. This is a 5 to 10 year bet. That's why Wall Street doesn't like it very much, because Wall Street wants reactions now. We think it's a very strategic bet in order for us to do it. The Facebook business is a very profitable business. We have usually 65% margin, meaning we are probably profitability-wise, we're one of the most profitable tech companies, which are the most profitable sector. In order for us to make this pivot, it's really, really a belief by the founder and the management team that this is going to be the big bet. And it's not necessarily just a product, it's not just a device, it's a whole ecosystem, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And it's also important to, although most people attribute the Metaverse to us, we are actually building for the Metaverse. We're not the only ones building the Metaverse. There's general consensus in the tech industry that this is the next wave. All the major tech companies are making their relative investments in this space. We happen to be leading on a couple of areas. We have the most number of devices and the most advanced technology as far as hardware. We also have the most people on our platform. So nobody wants to go to a neighborhood where there's no one. So that's why we have an advantage. But there are many gaming companies, people selling real estate, doing all sorts of activity. And there's going to be some experimentation. Some things will work, some things won't. But at the end of the day, this is how the internet gets shaped, and everybody will be part of shaping this internet. This transformation will have multiple applications, probably on all aspects of life, but 3 main ones that are relevant to most people is business, education, and work. We'll talk about them briefly. So for business, this opens up a whole realm of possibilities. You will be able to, there'll be new industries, new creations, the ability to do commerce, immersive commerce, the ability to create NFTs, buy and sell NFTs, trade, showcase your work. It's an ability for the creator ecosystem, who today maybe relies on advertising or sponsored content, to build entire industries outside. There are applications already that we're seeing for companies that are flourishing, just creating metaverse experiences for the users or for clients, but also people who are creating within the metaverse. When I'm talking about buying and selling digital assets, somebody has to create that. And so the possibilities are quite endless in this. And we'll talk about the economic implications, but they're going to be quite massive. This will also mean that some businesses will have to change the way they do business. I did a presentation back in March, and one of the audience members was His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince of Dubai. And afterwards, he came and said, I want to understand implications on 3 sectors: real estate, airlines, and tourism. And if you're familiar with Dubai, these are pillars of the ecosystem. And then there was the chairman of Emirates Airlines who specifically said, what's going to happen to Emirates, which is now the biggest airline in the world, and if you haven't traveled Emirates, travel Emirates. It's a great airline. And he's like, you know, this is going to change the travel experience. Are we going to have to put our movies on these things? And like, take a step. Maybe there is less travel. Which initially the reaction is very scary and probably not very positive, which was a warm conversation, became a bit like, what are you saying? But that doesn't mean that Emirates no longer becomes a company that takes you from one place to another. Nintendo used to be a board game company. And then as gaming or recreation shifted, they started developing consoles and they moved on. And I think if you are in the business of getting people from one place to another, that's going to mean something else maybe in the future. Some of it will be physical, some of it might be purely digital. And that's just one example. Education. To me, this is like the most obvious one. I mean, here's an example of a teacher or a mom trying to teach her student about the solar system. You can take a walk in the solar system. You can walk in ancient Egypt. You can hear the sounds, interact with the pharaohs, you can see what they ate, you can do all of this in real life. And if there's anything that there's consensus about in education, is that nothing beats experiencing it. So if you're able to submerge yourself in photosynthesis or ancient Rome, or be able to build something with your hands and see how it reacts, or do chemical experiments, see the implications, be able to overlay information, that's all as immersive as it gets. It also democratizes education. So AUC has some great courses. Most of the big universities around the world have their courses online for free. You could today take a Stanford course, a Harvard course, an MIT course, but you take them online. It's a bit of a drier experience, but what if you could completely immerse yourself in those campus experiences? The implications also on this part of the world. I've had to write like recommendation letter for people to go to university. I've had to write recommendation letter to immigration to allow students who have been accepted to top-notch universities to be given visas. It's sad, but this democratizes this level of access, which is fantastic. Workplace. I mean, if COVID has taught us something, is that the way we've been doing the workplace situation is in over so many years is definitely subject to change. We're not only talking about the limitation of having to get in your car, go from a building to another building where you do some work and then go back. I mean, if you break it down, we take it for granted, but why? But not just that. Why can't you operate with, do I need a PC or can I have a device that can project a screen in front of me? I can type on a laptop, I can have my contacts, I can have meetings. We today have products that we use, which is called Workplace, where we can have remote meetings. I can show up in an avatar. The audience can be avatars. You can be listening to me and having a side conversation. And it will feel real. It will feel like the person next to you can hear you. You're still seeing me and engage with my conversation. You can pull out a notepad, share something. You can record a piece of the conversation, send it to another team. You can do collaborative work. Multiple people from around the world can be working on the same document, on the same structure. It can be saved. I can build something here and then leave, and somebody can come from anywhere around the world and it will exist. So many of these implications are massive. One thing that we demoed recently also is some new features that we're rolling out with a new device. Real-time translation, simultaneous translation from any language to any language, which means I can be speaking in English, you could be hearing me in Arabic, you could speak to me in Arabic, I'll hear you in English seamlessly. That's possible. And the amount of engagement and extra collaboration that can create is also limitless. Avatars are your digital presence in that environment. And although it might seem kind of trivial, but it actually gives you the ability to showcase yourself in the way you see most fit. There was a big movement initially that we were trying to do hyper-realistic avatars, which mean like an avatar that looks exactly like you, with the pores and the hair, and like exactly, you'd look at it, you couldn't distinguish. The funny thing is that the research has shown that many people don't want that. Many people want to show themselves and express themselves in a different way. There's also the ability for people with disabilities who are challenged, who can live a full life in the digital world, where physics is a limitation to them. You can express yourself artistically, you can express yourself based on preferences, and you can also experiment with clothing, and what we recently added is legs. Before, avatars didn't have legs. Now, in the new versions, they'll have legs. And we added the ability to also build your avatar and be able to carry it across, because we recognize that this will be such an integral part of your identity that you shouldn't be kept exclusive to one platform. So you can build it, and then you can carry it over to other platforms, and you'll be able to start using these avatars soon in Reels and other things. The other thing about the avatars and the new device that we came up with is that we recognize that the eventuality of this metaverse is not going to be entirely just VR. There's going to be a VR and an AR component. So virtual reality, where you're fully digital, and augmented reality. Augmented reality is where I can look at this chair and I can see a character, or I can see I see you laughing. I know. He's like an AR master. So, and you'll see someone sitting there. This is very powerful because it goes to the point of not replacing reality, but enhancing reality. Giving more richness, more information, more color, more creativity to that world. And as part of this initiative, the new device not only tracks your environment, but also tracks your facial features. Because a huge part of the way we express ourselves, actually especially in the Arab world, is through facial expressions. So now with the new device, your avatar will be able to smile and cringe and show facial features that you're showing in real life, so it'll be able to express them. Even if you are in a cartoonish character, or if you show yourself as a dragon or whatever, it will still express that, which is meant to enhance the connection and show a greater connectivity. What does this all mean? It's all cute, but it has massive implications. We think this is going to be a $3 trillion impact on the global GDP. $3 trillion. 2.8% of the global GDP $360 billion in the Middle East alone in a decade. So, hence why this is a massive pivot. Not many people debate, this is top of mind because for those of you who know, we had our earnings call yesterday, and there was a lot of questioning from many analysts, like, why are you investing on something that's at such a far horizon? It's because it's going to be the new future. And you need to make that investment to capture that massive, massive opportunity. Why are the numbers so big? Because, as you've seen, if you try to size the impact of the internet on the economy, it practically takes over. So that's why this implication is going to be massive. It's also part of a massive ecosystem. There are many, many, many companies that are involved in different aspects of making this a reality. So although we are called Meta now, Metaverse is not exclusively owned by Meta. There's a ton of companies that are working in this space, and more coming up. There are also many professionals and professions that are being created for the Metaverse in this space. What is our role in the Metaverse then? We see our role on 3 key areas. One is hardware. So we have the MetaQuest Pro, we have the MetaQuest, we have the Ray-Ban Stories, and we just launched a newer device that is an AR/VR. Today, this is probably the most advanced and popular device out in the market. 10 million sold so far, and increasingly more and more. It's what generally people associate with the Metaverse. So whenever you see a picture, whatever, this kind of white box-like device, that's our product. The challenge there is that we're fully conscious that this is not what people want to be walking around all day doing this. We're in a big challenge to try to shrink it in size and in price. This retails today at about $300. The goal is to make it accessible to everybody. And also, to come down to a kind of glasses shape and weight. We have a strategic partnership that we've done with Ray-Ban, where we've tested some of these devices. We have the device which is called Ray-Ban Stories, which has minor features in it, but Ray-Ban, they're the biggest experts on glasses, how they should sit, the weight. It's a whole science. That's not what we do. So we're partnering with them to help us get it to that size. Software, both B2C and B2B, is where we create these opportunities and showcase what's available. So we have Horizon World, which is our metaverse environment where you can walk around and you can go to a coffee shop or you can attend a concert. During Expo, we live broadcasted over 60 concerts in Horizon World, Arabic artists, international artists, and where the venue would only be able to take on 3,000 or 4,000 attendees, we could have millions watching. So when Alicia Keys performed or Coldplay dropped their album at Expo, it's something like 26 million people watching it. There was a guy who I know, head of an agency in Dubai, who was at the event, but also watching it on his phone in Metaverse. Because at the event, it's crowded, you're far. In the Metaverse, you could be on stage. You could be next to the singer, you could be backstage. So he was augmenting the relationship through the device. Workrooms is what I discussed. It's our enterprise solution. It's where you're able to work remotely, engage with others. Venues and Metaspark is where you create the filters. So basically creating tools for people to be able to build. And then research and development, where we do a lot of these experiences. So the avatar facial expressions, which I described, this came out from the research and development. Gesture controls, haptic gloves, that's where you can touch things. You wear a glove, and if you hold a digital glass of water, you hold a digital glass of water. It's a glove that gives you feeling, and it exists. It's just, it's a question about making these things commercially viable. If you come to our head office in MPK, you'll be blown away by the things that technically are feasible. You can, there was one demo that one of the engineers did where he was speaking for about 2 minutes, and then he said, "That's not me, it's an avatar." And it was like hyper-realistic. You couldn't tell the difference. But, you have to get into a lab to make it happen, etc. So everything we do at scale. So all of these things, once they are developed, they move into mainstream. And real-time speech translation is another one of those. Augmented reality, which is right now is something we're very excited about because it is probably the most tangible, the thing that people have the least hard time being able to see. And it has tremendous commercial implications, which Wall Street likes. Like, it immediately translates into potential money. It's your ability to take a digital layer and put it on something that is real. You have a few examples here. Imagine if you're able to apply makeup, and you can test the makeup and how it would look on your skin tone, and then finish the transaction without any friction online. The likelihood that you're likely to buy it is significantly higher. Average person visits a website to buy a car 7 times before they go to the showroom. 7 times. If you're able to get in the car and experience it, that shrinks that journey a lot faster. Same thing with makeup, etc. It's also sometimes just not necessarily direct commercial, but you can take a very basic product like sparkling water and just make it exciting. Make the ad just fun. It's very competitive today to have your ad stand out. And as you're dealing with the scrolling culture, you have about, we used to say 3 seconds, probably around a second to capture the audience's attention. So when you have something like this, it makes a difference. And then when we talk about the car, if you are able to get inside the car, add features, build your dream car, there's something about human nature and investment of time versus commitment. It works in relationships, it works in commerce, it works with everything. It works with video, by the way. Like, if you have a video that is very engaging, you can put an ad before the person starts the video, because I want to see what the video is. If the video is not very engaging, you have to build what's called a social credit, which means you have to allow a person about 2 minutes into the video before you give them an ad. They don't have enough invested in the video. The same thing with this. When you're building a car or you're building any tool, once you build the car and you spend about 5-10 minutes building your dream car, it's very hard to leave it. It's why salesmen, when you go to the sales showroom, show you the top of the range with the sunroof and the extra dot, and then you say, "It's too expensive." Like, well, we can take away the sunroof. Like, People have a hard time downgrading, they upgrade. Human nature. So when you invest time, it makes sense. So all of things make the ability to apply very real world, very timeless lessons into a digital asset. Virtual reality takes this to the next level, where you're fully immersive and you're able to exist in a parallel space, parallel universe. And the implications to this that we've been seeing now are very massive. You're seeing things around fitness is one of the fastest growing categories, for instance, for us, where it's a new way of thinking about fitness. You can have a trainer, but you can also play with different tools. Social engagement, as well as obviously gaming, which is a leading area. This is just an example of a virtual reality activation by Pull & Bear, which I think is popular here, right? Pull & Bear, where they take you to the Pull & Bear Island, and you're able to be fully immersed in a walk around. And if you see something you like, an item, it pulls it up. It could pull it up on your avatar. You see how it would look on you. You can complete the transaction, buy it, and they ship you the real thing to your house. You can also get the digital thing if you want. Balenciaga did a full runway show, their new collection in the Metaverse. So how can we get there? And I get this question a lot, also by many clients, governments, is, I want to build the first mall in the metaverse. I want to do this. Okay, do you have an e-commerce strategy? Do you have a digital commerce strategy? Do you use social media? And I think these are all going to be cornerstones of building this new future. Today, if you don't play around with avatars or filters or AR, you can do that today before going to the metaverse. As a company, as a person, you can create your own avatar and build that muscle of thinking in those terms. There's a massive digital leap between seeing the value of a purely digital asset and a physical asset. And I'll give you another anecdote that happened to me. I deal with many family groups in the region, and one of the big family groups, I won't mention them by name, asked me, for the son, who's very digitally savvy, asked me to come speak to his father, who represents many brands in the Middle East. And after explaining this for about 10 minutes, he's like, do you think I don't get it? I'm like, no, sir, I think you get it, but it's just a bit of a bizarre concept. He's like, it's not. It's about putting value, agreeing that there is value, even if you yourself might not see the value yet. And he's like, let me tell you a story. Like, we used to trade in clothes and cloth, and I used to bring all this stuff from India into the Gulf, and we would sell it. And then we made some money, and I started traveling. And then one time I was in Paris, and I saw these shoes for like 300 euros. It's crazy, like who would buy shoes for 300 euros? And then I walked into the boutique and I saw how they designed it and stuff. And he was talking, I think, about Dior. And he said, I went to my dad and I said, we need to bring the license for this. And he's like blown away. Like, who would pay for 300 euros for a pair of shoes? Like, Dad, you got to go to the store and see it. They brought it. And it's about the perceived value. Within no time, that line of business, that company, took over all of their existing business because it differentiated them. They started this franchising model, which still exists till today. And the same thing will happen here. It's where people perceive value. Today, my stat, around a third of gamers in the US buy more in digital than in physical because they spend enough time and they get enough value out of it. So once that mental shift happens, that's where you see what we call the hockey stick of engagement and uptake. Experiment, Spark AR, some of the activations that we mentioned here, these are all results of experiments. It's a brand new space. There are no rules, there's no do's and don'ts. Even regulation has not caught up fully into it. So it's time to experiment and see what works. And you might come onto something that, Uber came as a result of that, and Netflix, and all of these companies rode on the ability of the internet to provide you data and access into your home. So the possibilities are endless. And connect with partners. I think the same way we're approaching this is not going to be a one-company effort. This is going to be a much wider exercise by many companies. And so, because the space is so wide, I don't think there is room to be competitive at this point. It's just about evangelizing the idea and trying to get as many people on it as possible. So we'll talk about our partnership with RD Egypt. So as part of this effort, and part of our lessons also from Web 2.0, where we kind of led the way, is that we realized that we move quicker than many regulators, many developers, and so we have a commitment to educate and try to foresee some challenges. These new changes won't come without challenges or dangers, right? It's a new world, it's a new way of how people interact. It's difficult to predict how human behavior will operate in such a world. So we've allocated $150 million a year to think tanks and academic institutions and philosophers and journalists, and to think about ways in which we need to safeguard the community. And they come up with ideas, which we also work with regulators to try to have them keep up and help us. We also dedicate about $50 million a year in working with initiatives and creators that can showcase what is possible. And here, I'm glad to say that Global XR Fund is the first initiative that we've done in North Africa, which with Art Egypt to showcase some of these possibilities. And we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. Unique experiences. So what we're doing is we're creating 11 AR filters to create an immersive experience of the art installations that you'll see by the pyramids. Just like when we show the education, etc., is how can we bring these art installations to life? How can we also help export the installations that are physically present in Egypt to the rest of the world? And like I said, it's the first collaboration in the region. So how will it work? You can go in front of each of the installation. There'll be a QR code that you can use your phone. And once you put it on, it will open up a filter. You get a digital guide that will help you explain to you the activation, guide you through the whole exhibit, and bring a little bit more of a richer experience to life. Again, it's an experiment. It's one of several experiments that we're doing in Egypt even, actually. And the goal, I encourage you all to try it. It doesn't take away from the beauty and the creativity of the art exhibits. To the contrary, it gives you a richer experience. It shares with you the vision of the artists. It shares with you, it puts you also in an immersive way with the piece of art. And it opens up the possibility for the artists themselves to think beyond just what's physical and what's available in the real world. It gives them the ability to enhance those experiences to a larger degree. So with that, I'll pause. I'm happy to answer any questions. I hope it was like informative. I wanted to give you like kind of a synopsis of the things that we're working on. And I think it's exciting. I think it's something that the region can really excel in. We generally in the region, what I've seen, don't always lead the way in R&D and stuff, especially on the technical stuff. But where we do lead the way is in adoption. And whenever we develop something, whether it's video, where we consume double the global average on our platform in the region, or whether it's social media, where on average we consume 3 hours a day in social media, also significantly more than the global average. AR filters, where we have wonderful creators who are doing some amazing things on there, but also massive adoption. So we have about 40 million people who use AR filters in Egypt on a monthly basis. We have 700 million people who use it on a global basis. So this trend is happening, and it's happening quickly. And the fact that it's exotic is, I think, an opportunity. And the fact that you're all here is testament to you to want to learn a little bit more about it, because it's undoubtable that this will be the future. Thank you. You have time for a question? No? Okay, great. Thank you.